enough sleep, and it could contribute to weight gain, because when you're not getting enough sleep, your body's not resting enough, and you can gain weight. When you're up, you might be eating more than you need to. And when I read the article, I found how interesting it was that younger children who come from minorities and low-income families do not get enough sleep, and they're more likely to be obese than kids who aren't from minorities and who are in middle-income families as well. So it's very important that kids get enough sleep to be able to develop and just grow altogether. And here at this point in my research, I started thinking it's very interesting that mainly when I would research pediatric articles, things about obesity would come up. So then that started the gears in my head started to turn about what I could do for my original work, and I'll get into that a little later as well. For the fifth article, I strayed away from the obesity topic than what I was talking about before, and it was talking about how teenagers need a later start time, and this kind of goes with the insufficient sleep and how it goes with obesity. And as teenagers, like I said, you don't really get enough sleep. You might procrastinate on your work and go to sleep later, and just in the biology aspect and chemical aspect of life, we have a chemical called melatonin in our body that is secreted later in life when we get older, that tells our body when to sleep. So as a teenager, your melatonin is being secreted later than when you were 5 or 6. So this later school time is proposed by American Academy of Pediatrics, and here in Frisco, I know that we have a later start time than other schools. We start at 9 compared to 7 or 8 o'clock. So I also thought, when they say later start time, who are they talking to specifically? So I took this information into my interviews as well. So when you're researching, I just think it's interesting how different topics can come from one career choice, one career path, which is pediatrics, how I can jump from learning about obesity, one article, to learning about genetic information, to learning about motivational interviewing. And that's really something I've gained from ISM, is how to research and look how to pinpoint what I'm looking for and how to get information out of that. So then I go into my interview assessments, and with interview assessments, you're gaining a whole new perspective that something a computer Google search won't necessarily tell you. And I enjoyed interviewing with professionals because it helped me gain real world experiences, and like I said, I gained information that I wouldn't necessarily receive from Google. So with interviews, we have to get into contact with professionals, and with this, I learned how to communicate, how to resource and network on my own, because in ISM, you're independent study and mentorship. You're doing this work by yourself. Your teacher's not helping you, your classmates, your mom, your dad, they're not holding your hand through it. So I had to go out and network and contact people and get those interviews. So my first interview came from Dr. Blatt, and she was my first interview. We talked on the phone, and she really stressed that I need to make sure that pediatrics is something that I really want to do in life. And with this first interview, I asked a bunch of general questions because I haven't been on an interview before. So I wanted to gain the basis of where I need to take further interviews. So I asked her what was a major challenge that she faces personally in pediatrics. And she said that parents can pose a challenge, because with parents, they come in and they feel that they know what's best for the child, but as a pediatrician, you're trained and you've studied this field and you know what's best. So sometimes you have to work with the parent to get them to understand that you have both the parent and the child's best interest in mind to work together. And like I said before, I wanted to study pediatrics because I didn't want to be specific to becoming a pediatrician or a pediatric nurse or anything. I wanted to make sure that I was getting the whole experience, and that's what I get from ISM. So my second interview, I decided to interview Nurse Williams, and she showed me the dynamics of being a pediatric nurse and how the work environment can change day to day. She works at Forest Park Medical Center, and she can see 3 patients a day, one day, and then the next day she could see 10 patients going back and forth through surgery. And I thought that was really interesting. As a nurse, your work environment changes so much. And something else that changes for nurses versus pediatricians is how easily you can go back to school to gain your master's, become a nurse practitioner, and how you can go back to school. Say you're a pediatric nurse at first, you can go back to school and become a pediatric cardiology nurse who studies in cardiology and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. So for my third interview, I decided to interview another pediatrician to get more information. And I interviewed Dr. Lessner, and she is actually a part-time pediatrician because she has a family that she has to tend to. She's not able to work in a medical office and a hospital like some of her colleagues. So because of her busy schedule, we were only allotted a phone interview. So on the phone, even on this phone interview, she was going to pick up her kids, so I thought that was interesting how she could balance her life like that as a pediatrician. And from her, I gained the knowledge that it is possible to have a family and be a pediatrician, because usually you hear about it, but you don't really see it, you don't really get to experience it. So from that interview, I really got to know that you can have a family and be a pediatrician. The most advice that she gave to me when I asked her what she advises pediatricians, young pediatricians to do, is to take more business classes in college and in school, because when you're working in pediatrics, you're not only working in the medical field, you're also working as a business partner with your office manager, other pediatricians, your patients, doing billing information, insurance, and all those things. So I thought that was really interesting how she suggested that I take more business classes as a pediatrician, because usually you think, oh, science is what you need to focus on, but you need to be well-rounded and know all the in and outs of working in an office or a hospital. For my fourth interview, I interviewed Dr. Ahmed. He works in pediatric emergency, which is different than the interviews I went on before, which were general pediatrics and surgical pediatrics. And he also teaches at Texas Tech Medical School down there. So he showed me that, again, you can balance life. You can do so many more things as a pediatrician. You don't have to sit in an office and work with patients. You can go out and help teach others. So I thought that was very interesting. And with him, I brought in my information I gained from my research. Wanted to make sure I got to work that in, and I asked him about the later start times with high schoolers, and he said that a later start time in high school would prompt to do a domino effect, and that more things would change, that sometimes we're not really satisfied with what we get, so we would just ask for more and more and more. So I thought that was really interesting. He had that kind of insight on the topic. At the same office, I interviewed the office manager, who is actually a nurse as well, and her name was Leslie Milliner. And at first she worked in pediatric emergency, but then she went back to school and she got the proper requirements and degrees to become the office manager. So as the office manager, she can have the knowledge of being a nurse and the business aspect as well. And she told me that as an office manager, you need to be able to work with families, and pediatricians, you need to be well-rounded and a people person as well. And from her, I asked her what she advises me as a young pediatrician to do with my life right now to help me better prepare to go into pediatrics. And she suggested that I get a job working with kids. So I thought that was really interesting. And she suggested this to me because she said usually when people go into pediatrics, they think, oh, I get to play with kids, but when they actually get into that environment, they're not well prepared to actually interact with kids. So ever since then, I work at the Blue Elephant, and I think that's really helped me become more comfortable working with kids at my age, so that when I do go through medical school and become a pediatrician, I'll be better equipped to handle situations with kids and parents. So that was about when my 2014 year ended, and standing here now in 2015 as I reflect back on 2014, I think the most important thing that I learned from ISM was communication. Communication is definitely number one, and it's definitely the key to success in ISM. Like I said, your mom, your dad, and your teacher, they're not holding your hand through the class. You have to go out and make those business contacts. ISM has also taught me to become more professional. When you're dealing with actual professionals, you can't just shoot them a text and be like, hey, I'll be here at this time. You have to actually call them, maybe go to their office if they're not willing to meet with you that certain day, and that's what I did as well. And the research I did, whether it was in interviews or articles, helped me take the necessary precautions into what I want to set my goals for 2015, and that was to find a mentor and settle my mind on an original work. And the Winter Showcase was definitely something that showed all my work in 2014, and it reflected on what I wanted to do in 2015 and how I was going to go about that. So I have my display board, and here I'm pictured with a friend, and we're working together. And with ISM, like I said, communication is key. So it was interesting that I might be studying pediatrics, but somebody else might be studying speech language pathology, but we're still getting the same experiences. We're still learning to become professionals, still learning to communicate with others, and sharing those experiences was something that I really enjoyed in 2014 because we were studying different things and exploring different career paths. So 2015 for me started with finally getting a mentor, and my mentor is Dr. Cynthia Webb, who I introduced at the beginning of the presentation tonight. She works at the Pediatric Associates of Dallas office in Plano and Dallas, and so if you're ever looking for a pediatrician, just make your way over there. She's awesome. So talking to Dr. Webb first on our first meeting, she was talking to me about how at first she wanted to become a cardiologist, but then when she went through rotations and she went through medical school, she found herself more towards the pediatric side. So she tried pediatric cardiology, and she found that she wasn't really interested in that, so pediatrics was where she settled in on. And with Dr. Webb, something interesting to note about is she went through medical school and her residency with a family, and again, it showed me that I can do the same. I can balance a family, work, and becoming a doctor just like anybody else. And as long as you're willing to work, like Maya Angelou said, you're willing to work, you'll be willing to do anything. Whatever you want will happen for you if you're just willing to go after that. So when I meet with Dr. Webb, we usually talk about my observations and what I noted, and we discussed those things. So our first visits, we met at the Pediatric Associates of Plano, and when I went in there, she was usually finishing notes. And something that I learned from that was, as a pediatrician, your work doesn't stop when you clock out. You continue to do patient's notes. You continue to research. And I was talking to Dr. Webb about how she stays up to date on pediatric information, and she told me that the best thing to do is continue to read articles, subscribe to the American Academy of Pediatrics and get the articles from them, read from them, and usually they have seminars and lectures at hospitals, and she stays involved in pediatrics, going to those and learning more information through those programs as well. So when I meet with Dr. Webb, besides talking about pediatrics, the work that goes into it, we talk about families as well, because when you're a pediatrician, you're not only working with small children, you're working with families as well. So we talked about how families and technology, how they've grown with technology as technology grows, and how easy it is for a mom or dad to just Google search, my kid has a fever, and 1,000 different things come up, and usually they come into the pediatric office saying, well, I read on this blog that this fever can lead to something traumatic, when it's just maybe simple, your child's overheated. So I thought that was interesting how technology has helped us, but also hindered us in a way that we believe almost everything that's put on a blog. And for pediatricians and nurses as well, you have to be able to communicate with parents and families that maybe that's not what's necessarily going on with your kid. Maybe let's take this way and explore this option as well. And when you're talking with families as well, the discussion of vaccinations usually come up. And some families feel that their child's okay without vaccinations, and some families feel that it's necessary. So I was talking to Dr. Webb and what she thought, and she was telling me how some families don't think vaccinations are necessary because something like measles and smallpox, we haven't really seen an outbreak of it in a long time, but just a couple months ago there was a measles outbreak. So it's just interesting how people have that mindset that, oh, it's not happening right now, but still it could happen, so vaccinations are important. And I think that's something that in pediatrics they're facing a problem with that, besides obesity, that families don't want to get their children vaccinated when they really should. Other than vaccinations and technology, other challenges are staying up to date on information and making sure that you know what you're talking about. And I was talking to Dr. Webb and I was asking her, how do you, when someone comes in with a long list of symptoms, how are you able to just go in and diagnose? And she was saying that sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you have to pull out your phone, Google search WebMD, and see from a reliable source, WebMD is reliable, to see maybe what symptoms they are, and you can talk to the parent, and both of you can come to a conclusion. Or sometimes maybe you have to step out of the office a little bit and go talk to another pediatrician or another nurse to get their thoughts on what the diagnosis should be. So as a pediatrician, again, communication is so important. You're communicating with families, other pediatricians, other nurses. So that's what I learned from my mentor visits, just sitting face-to-face, one-on-one with Dr. Webb, talking about different things. So when I talk to Dr. Webb about what I notice, my questions usually come from observations. And with these observations, I get to sit in with Dr. Webb and the families. Usually she goes in before me and asks the family if it's okay if I can come in and just observe. And usually I'm very fortunate to have the family say, yes, sure, she can come in. So what I saw was that each family is different. No family is the same. They have different dynamics, how they work together, all that, how they interact with themselves, how they interact with Dr. Webb. So I thought that was really interesting that when you're walking into one room and then you leave, you walk into another room, you're not getting the same thing as a pediatrician. And just from observing alone, I noticed that a lot of sick patients came, and maybe that's because when I go in to do observations, it was usually at night. So parents are coming in with a sick child, and I got to see a lot of that where Dr. Webb asks them questions and they ask her questions, and again, together they come to a conclusion of what the diagnosis should be. And as well as sick patients, I got to see wellness checkups as well. And for me personally, I really enjoyed seeing Dr. Webb interact with the patients and the families as well. Whether it would be a 10-month-old or a 10-year-old, she always made sure that the families felt special and that the child too felt like they weren't being interrogated or that they were at the doctor's office. It was more of a calm situation, and like I said before, I want that to be how I become a pediatrician. When you're coming to the doctor's office, you're not, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a shot, but it's more of a relaxed coming into the doctor's office. Oh, I'm going to go see Dr. D today, so I'm relaxed. And one big thing I really learned from Dr. Webb, just watching her and talking to her as well, is that listening is so important. Whether you're a pediatrician, a teacher, a chef, anything, listening is very important. And I asked her what separates a good pediatrician from a great pediatrician, and she said that listening is what separates a great pediatrician from a good pediatrician, because when families come in, they want to make sure that you're listening to them and that you're hearing what their problems are and what they're taking to solve those problems. And it's good to have knowledge and be knowledgeable, but if you're not listening to what the family's saying, then what are you truly knowledgeable about? What are you contributing to what they come in with? So I thought that was really interesting from my observations. So with Dr. Webb, apart from observing and seeing how she works, we talk about my product. And at first, without a mentor, I thought about what I should do. And my original work was I wanted to do something with obesity because I had researched so much about it and seen so many articles that talked about obesity. So I decided I wanted to do a cookbook at first. But with the cookbook, I started to think, could a 5-year-old really start chopping up carrots and put it in a blender and stuff like that and make a 5-course meal? So then I decided to come into a snack book. And I came to this because of that conclusion, because 5-year-olds can't always chop carrots and do the necessary things, boil pasta and all that. So with a snack book, children are seen snacking more. And it's not just small children, it's teenagers too, young adults. For me personally, I see myself snacking at school all the time. And sometimes they're unhealthy. So with a snack book, you would be able to create healthy snacks, and you would be able to interact with your child while you're making the snack and enjoying time together while you're being healthy. So with the snack book, I did a little research with Cooper's Clinic and Kids Teaching Kids to help me start researching. And with Kids Teaching Kids, that came from Medical City, and they had a similar idea of a snack book and how they wanted to help kids fight obesity and just become healthier in general. So talking more about how did I get to my cookbook, as of now, I'm finalizing the contents of the book and just making sure that each page is engaging to children and parents alike. I also have all the information that goes into the nutritional part of my snack book done, and for that I asked Dr. Webb some questions about if she knew any nutritionists, and she actually does. She knows Dr. Van Beber from TCU, the nutritional department, and I got into contact with her and I asked her her ideas of my snack book. And one thing that she said to me that really stuck out is that she always tells people to make sure that they are eating the rainbow. And with eating the rainbow, when you look at your plate, look at your snack, whatever you're eating, you need to make sure that you have a variety of colors, that maybe you have carrots orange, blueberries blue, strawberries red. When you're eating the rainbow, you're getting such a broad range of foods, and more than likely you're gonna have a good nutritional pool from that. When I say eating the rainbow, don't go out and buy like M&Ms and gummy worms of different colors, because those aren't healthy. But when you're eating the rainbow, you're making sure that you're getting those nutritional values from your fruits and vegetables alike. So far this is what my snack book looks like. Like I said, I did all my nutritional information research, and on the sides there I have, this is the front cover, sorry, and then the nutritional facts. This is an original recipe I did, and it's the mini variable, and what you have in there, you take a Tostitos scoop chip and you fill it with a little bit of Greek yogurt and whatever fruit you would like, and you have a little bowl. And with my original work, the snack book, I wanted to make sure that every recipe that's included was under 300 calories. And at first that was a little bit hard because you could add something and then boom, you're already at 200 calories. But then when I talked to Dr. Webb and Dr. Van Beber about what I could substitute, it became a little bit more easier for me to compose snacks that are under 300 calories. And then dark chocolate trail mix, which has dark chocolate and peanuts in it, another recipe that's under 300 calories, has great source of potassium and protein, which was something that Dr. Van Beber also stressed to me, that kids aren't getting enough protein and monosaturated fats as well, so she thought that I should include that more when I do my snack book. So with my snack book and into the future, with this product, I want it to be used outside of ISM class. I want it to be something that 10 years from now, someone could pull out and be like, hey, let's make this snack together, let's be healthy, let's spend time together. And for me, that's why I really wanted to make the snack book, to be healthy, but to also be used outside of ISM class, something that families all around could use and have access to. And in the future right now, until the end of the year, working with Dr. Webb, I want to continue to collaborate with her to improve my original work until it's finally finished. And then I want to keep learning from her as much as I can, as much as possible. Like I said, I want to create an original work that goes beyond usage in ISM. And for me, personal goals I have for my future, 20 years from now, I want to become a very successful pediatrician. I want to impact lives on a daily basis. And something that ties my whole ISM experience together is a word you've probably heard me repeat 1,000 times, is relationships, relationships, relationships. I want to build those relationships with my patients and families to impact lives and just help make the world a better place. We say it's impossible, but it is possible. One person can make a change. Again, my name is Annabella Dew. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and hearing my speech and what I've learned in ISM so far this year. Thank you for your time.